Hello fellow gamers, I'm Christopher Chrisman of Retro Game Network, and coming up next, a look at last week's retro video game news on the RGN Files for the week ending Saturday, June 16, 2018. The catchphrase of the week was without a doubt Electronic Entertainment Expo. This past week, the convention took place at the Los Angeles Convention Center in California. While most people associate E3 with modern video games, there were some stories of interest to retro gamers as well. Leading our coverage this week comes to us from distributor Limited Run Games, who held a press conference during this year's event. It was announced that the company, alongside of developer Screaming Villains, would be releasing a newly remastered edition of the 1993 Sega CD title Double Switch to the PlayStation 4 platform. The game is a full-motion video game, similar in style and gameplay to Night Trap, in which both games were originally published by Digital Pictures. The announcement at E3 showed a very small snippet of the updated graphics, which have been greatly remastered since the game's original release. Double Switch is notorious for being the game that starred Corey Haim, R. Lee Ermey, as well as Debbie Harry. There is currently not much information available about the upcoming release. However, Limited Run Games has announced that a port to the PlayStation 4 has been confirmed, with hopes of bringing the game to the Nintendo Switch later. In other related news, at the same event, Limited Run Games also made the announcement that the highly anticipated Nintendo Switch port of the 25th anniversary edition of Night Trap, which was released last August also by Screaming Villains, would become available for pre-order beginning on July 6th. Stay tuned to Retro Game Network for the latest developments and details as we approach this release next month. Hyperkin had also taken to the E3 floor this week, showing off their upcoming Retron 77. The Retron 77 is a video game emulation device that will allow retro video gamers to play their existing Atari 2600 cartridge collection on modern television sets without issue. The system takes advantage of the popular Stella emulator for playing the games on your television set, and will offer all of the classic selection switches as the original legacy hardware. The device will also come bundled with a new style joystick controller that will offer two fire buttons designed to be more user-friendly for left-handed gamers. The system will also be compatible with legacy controllers, however no other peripherals are guaranteed to be supported. While the Retron 77 will include an SD card slot, the slot will not permit gamers to load ROM images into memory using this method. However, Hyperkin does say that the system will be compatible with flash cards, including the popular Harmony cartridge. It is currently unknown if the console would be compatible with Atari 7800 cartridges. Pre-orders are currently being accepted by Hyperkin, and the system costs just under $70 and are slated to begin shipping on July 7th. Nintendo was also very active at this year's E3, and while they focused mostly on modern gaming, they did bring some interesting news of interest to retro gamers. While they announced that the original Donkey Kong arcade ROM images were officially being released for the very first time since their creation, it was the announcement of a rare game getting the same treatment that had retro gamers turning their heads. The Nintendo arcade cabinet, known as Sky Skipper, is currently being redeveloped for Nintendo's current console, the Nintendo Switch. Sky Skipper was released exclusively in Japan back in 1981, and is considered to be the spiritual sequel to their hit Donkey Kong. The arcade title was not a success in Japan, and it was never brought to the United States. However, an Atari 2600 port of the game was actually released in 1983. It had been said that the original cabinets were dismantled and recycled for Nintendo's then popular Popeye cabinet, in which only one of the original cabinets remain in existence. While ROM images of Sky Skipper have circulated online over the years, the first official release of the game is slated to be released by Nintendo next month. In other news this week, SNK has officially announced their upcoming Neo Geo Mini console, which had been previously rumored by the company. Last April, SNK teased gamers with the potential of releasing an all-in-one device that offered a variety of Neo Geo titles, which was confirmed about 1 week ago. The system will be an all-in-one console that offers 40 built-in titles from the Neo Geo library in a contained arcade-inspired device, complete with a 3.5-inch screen, joystick, and arcade-like buttons. The device will also offer the ability to connect to an HDMI-based television alongside of an external controller port, in which the control pads will be based on the Neo Geo CD system from the 1990s. Using a controller will also offer co-op and competitive gameplay options. Two versions of the device are going to be offered, a standard and international edition, in which the included games will vary. The standard edition offers more fighting games, while the international version will offer more action titles. The system is scheduled to be released in Japan this summer, to be followed by a global release later on. There's currently no word on what the final cost of the system would be. We at Retro Game Network are sad to report the death of video game graphic designer and developer Shoji Mizuno. Best known for giving the character of Bomberman his iconic look and style, the word about his death had been reported by former executive Toshiyuki Takahashi, who has written an article that memorizes his various contributions with Hudson Soft. Mizuno's accomplishments in the video game world go as far back as the early 90s, and while he'll be mostly remembered for helping design Bomberman's appearance into the look that we currently are familiar with, he also worked on other video game titles, such as Wario Blast, Super Adventure Island, and Sonic Shuffle. He also worked as a character designer for the Beyblade television animated series. His cause of death is currently unknown at this time, and he was 58 years old. Coming up next, a personal viewpoint on a piece of this week's retro video game news with our WIMHO, well, in my humble opinion, commentary. It's always an exciting time of year for video game players when the E3 convention goes into full swing. Most of the time, companies from all over the world meet up to discuss the future of electronic entertainment. However, there's always some great developments in the world of retro video gaming as well. At this year's convention, Hyperkin announced the beginning of pre-orders for their upcoming Retron 77 console, an emulation device that would allow gamers to play their existing Atari cartridge collection using modern methods. Now, while some retro video gamers prefer playing their collections on CRT televisions, as the technology ages, they are becoming more and more scarce. Many retro gamers are somewhat divided about Hyperkin as a company. While many retro video gamers appreciate the concept of bringing modern versions of legacy consoles to modern televisions, others have criticized the company in recent times, mostly due to occasional quality control. Also in recent years, Hyperkin has begun changing their model types of releasing their consoles individually for each legacy console, as opposed to the multi-console such as the Retron 5 that they were notorious for releasing just a few years ago. The question this week is, should Hyperkin focus on releasing individual systems or go back to their earlier methods of combining cartridge slot for multi-system compatibility? Now keep in mind that as of this date, I personally have never used any Hyperkin product, and I can only base my viewpoints on concepts as opposed to quality. Well, in my humble opinion, I think that there is room for both. I understand why the company spent time releasing video game systems that are compatible with only one legacy console. Many retro video game collectors out there choose to collect for only one specific system, or maybe a particular company, meaning that most of the multi-consoles like the Retron 5 would simply be undesirable. However, gamers like myself, who collect for multiple systems, appreciate the idea and concept of systems like the Retron 5. The problem with them, however, is obviously the need for consistent upgrade. One of the reasons that I passed on the Retron 5 is because it lacked an Atari 2600 slot. Back in 2014, Hyperkin stated that they wanted to include Atari compatibility, but was unable to do so at the time. Now that the company has been able to present a modern console compatible with the Atari 2600, I would now consider getting a potential Retron 6 that would offer all of the slots for my large collection. Maybe by then they'll also be able to include compatibility with the Atari 7800 as well. And as far as replacing the Retron 5 with a modern system every few years when a brand new system is offered, we'll take a look at gamers that buy a new model of the PlayStation 4 or Xbox just a few years after the original was released, or those that purchase the latest cell phone every year. It all depends on the hobby that you enjoy the most. In conclusion, while I appreciate the reasoning why Hyperkin has recently changed their hardware development methods, I certainly hope that we can start seeing multi-consoles again in the future. And that is my humble opinion. This week in Retro Game Network Original Features, we presented to our readers a brand new edition of our VHS Rewind segment. This time around, we went back to 1982 and took a look at two Laserdisc videos that were used in conjunction with Atari home computer point-of-sale and demonstration kiosks, which stores would use to allow potential customers to learn more about the computer line in an interactive manner. The system showcased the lineup's abilities for both the business and educational markets, and of course, their ability to play games. The Laserdiscs were developed by Atari Design Research, with Harry Brown leading the project. In 2011, the videos were preserved by Scott Philpin in conjunction with an interview conducted by Brown for the Atari Compendium website. The two videos in their entirety can be found on Retro Game Network's latest VHS Rewind feature. And finally, this past Tuesday, we at Retro Game Network conducted our very first official Twitch stream after testing the waters over the past month. Sadly, Alvin and the Chipmunks made yet another appearance thanks to our microphone settings being incorrect. You may remember that this happened previously during our test periods. The good news, however, is that we seem to have found the source of the problem, and future streams should function properly. New streams occur on our Twitch channel every Tuesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern, and you can follow us at twitch.tv/RetroGameNet. That's it for this week's edition of the RGN Files. For those listening on BGM on FM, please stay tuned. There'll be more video game music coming up shortly. For complete details of any of this week's stories, visit RetroGameNetwork.com. And don't forget to check us out on social media outlets, on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at Retro Game Network, and on Twitter and Twitch at RetroGameNet. For the RGN Files, I'm Christopher Christman. This week's news story is provided by the following: Amoeba, Bombastic Bomberman Shrine, Comicbook.com, Eurogamer, Hyperkin, Limited Run Games, Nintendo Life, Polygon. The opinions expressed during our WIMHO commentary segment are not necessarily those of other contributors of Retro Game Network or any of its affiliates.